When we started the show 500 episodes ago, Donald Trump was a Democrat. Next week, he claims the Republican nomination for president.
From the Battelle studio at WOSU at COSI, this is Columbus on the Record. Joining Mike Thompson this week, Herb Asher, Ohio State University political scientist, Ann Fisher, host of All Sides with Ann Fisher on 89.7 NPR News, Terry Casey, Republican strategist, and Sandy Tice, director of Progress Ohio.
Welcome to our 500th episode. We'll look back in just a moment, but first, Donald Trump has found someone who wants to be his running mate. Trump was supposed to hold a big announcement on Friday, but he postponed it because of the attack in Nice, France. Instead, he announced it on Twitter that Governor Mike Pence of Indiana would be his running mate. Pence apparently passed his audition rally earlier this week.
We're ready to put a fighter, a builder, and a patriot in the Oval Office of the United States of America. We're ready for Donald Trump to be our next president.
Terry Casey, he's a white male, Tea Party religious conservative. What's the strategy here?
I think part of it is both safety, because when you already got Donald Trump, you don't need another person trying to grab headlines too much, and it does shore up some of the conservative base. And in the polling this past week in Ohio, Trump still got some folks in the Republican family to bring home. So it serves that purpose. Obviously, there's a governor maybe in Columbus who feels that he had a better record in the House and as a governor, but that marriage didn't come together, so he went to Indiana.
So Donald Trump, sometimes a VP is picked to get to the middle, to attract independents. Mike Pence, Sandy Tice, is not the person who's going to
No, and Donald Trump already has a terrible problem with women, and this is just going to make it worse. He has a terrible record on abortion. He is the first governor in America to lock up a woman who had an abortion. He's a nutcase, and the social conservatives are going to vote for him anyway. They're going to vote for the Republicans anyway. Mitt Romney got 53% of the white women vote. Donald Trump isn't going to get close, and this is only going to make it worse.
Well, Sandy's obviously a one-issue kind of thing, but I still think once we get done with the conventions by August and the Olympics, it's going to be back. It's Hillary or Trump. Which one do you like least? Those are the two people that people are going to focus on.
Herb Asher, Newt Gingrich called Mike Pence, quote, a relatively stable, more normal person. He later backed off that a little bit. But
more normal than Newt.
Not a ringing endorsement, but of course he just lost out, Newt Gingrich.
Yeah, well, as Terry said, I mean, Trump sort of made a safe pick in the sense that Pence will not upstage him. He will not out-intellectualize him, if you will. Newt Gingrich is a brilliant man in many ways. Newt Gingrich is a little unpredictable. I can see why Trump might say, I'm not sure I need Newt Gingrich to be my running mate. And if he did have Newt Gingrich as his running mate, he probably should get a food taster also. Just,
And I mean, Trump does have an appeal with Democrats and independents. You see the polls where he does pretty well among those, at least the independents, compared to Hillary Clinton. So this is a way to solidify his base.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, there's also the people that said that they were for Bernie Sanders and say now that they're for Trump. So there's a huge wild card in there. There's no question about it. But whether or not that wild card shows up at the polls in November is the big question, I think. And I think that, that's what he's going to have to appeal to. Pence brings a lot of baggage, and a lot of baggage that's been very, very well publicized, and people are very familiar with the law in Indiana that the religious freedom law, which got him terrible press across the country.
This was the law was accused of being anti-gay, anti-LGBT.
Right. Exactly.
He actually had to back down on that a little bit and soften the law a little bit.
He never said he did something wrong, but he said people had a perception of wrongness about it. Whatever.
He also doesn't believe that smoking causes cancer. Really? If you look at all the money he got from big tobacco, he doesn't believe that climate change is real. Look at the money he's gotten from big oil. I think the people who think the system is rigged are going to look at that and find him to be laughable.
But Herb, are you always going to find holes in a VP? There's always going to be a person of running for public office or in public office. There's going to be places you can attack them.
Sure.
Is Mike Pence any more vulnerable to these attacks than, say, Newt Gingrich or Chris Christie or even John Kasich, for that matter?
Most of Mike Pence's weaknesses are not yet known by the broader electorate. Gingrich, Christie, and in some ways John Kasich are actually better known. So the real question becomes, when these things become known, do they make a difference to anybody? And what I think it does is it actually in some ways narrows Trump's appeal. That's really, I think. And I think Sandy's point about the women's vote, you know, Democrats always talk about the gender gap and how in fact they do better among women. Well, in fact, in recent elections, Republicans have carried white women. And the reason Democrats carry the women's vote is they get overwhelming support among women of color. I think this election, there's a good chance that, in fact, Democrats will carry the white women's vote. And then when you add to that their overwhelming support among women of color, that's going to be a tremendous advantage for the Democrats. Pence doesn't help you with that.
Terry, moving to the convention, starts Monday in Cleveland. What do you expect? There's a lot of controversy or talk about the lack of big-name speakers on the GOP side. You know, no former presidents, no former nominees. What do you think the convention is going to be like?
Well, without equivocation, I'm going to predict that it gets big ratings because with Trump and other things, it's the unknown. But my sense of both of these conventions, there's going to be lots of media hype. They want ratings, but when it's all said and done, people are kind of going to shrug their shoulders. Most of the people, unless us junkies, are going to follow and talk about this stuff. But most real people are busy on other things. There's the Olympics. It's really September when the campaign's going to start.
And a lot of fears about trouble. The attack in France raised those fears, but Cleveland has done a lot, has done a lot to prepare, has been successful in handling other demonstrations. What can we expect up there? Do we expect trouble up there?
Well, I think they're probably taking all the precautions they can. There's 3 levels of security to get into the convention hall itself, but I think the action's going to be out on in the hinterlands. It's going to be more interesting. I know some newspapers have as many people covering the inside of the convention, or as many people covering the outside as they have them inside. And also you've got people traveling from all over the country to grab attention at the GOP convention.
But the media is almost inciting a riot because saying, in order to get on TV, act up. And I'm not sure.
Your nominee doesn't incite a little bit of angst?
I don't know if media's. I mean, that's not. This isn't the. I mean, that's just.
Well, but there's a
conventional
lot of people
wisdom
on both sides of the aisle. They like media attention, and they know if you act up. In other words, the media has shown in the last year they aren't interested in covering policy substance. They're interested in covering the tangential issues.
This is actually always the pattern at conventions. And if the media can find controversy inside or outside, the more conflictual, the more interesting a visual story it is for television. So, in fact, that's always been the case. And I think people who protest understand here's how you get media coverage. You be outrageous. And ideally, it won't be violent outrageous, maybe just verbally outrageous.
There's signs and whatnot.
Yeah.
I think they're very well prepared. But what's going to be interesting is John Kasich is going to be in Cleveland every day. He's running for president in 4 years. He was out in California a couple weeks ago raising money, and he has a captive audience. He has the national press. He has a lot of dignitaries in the Republican Party, and he's going to be getting a lot of attention.
But the Governor Sunday is going to be down in Cincinnati at the NAACP convention speaking there, and there'll people compare what does Kasich say versus what does Hillary say on Monday.
And Trump won't be there at all.
Trump won't be there, that's right. Yeah.
Let's get to our next topic. We still don't know who Hillary Clinton's running mate will be, but this week she officially gained the support of someone perhaps more important than her VP pick. Clinton and her chief rival, Bernie Sanders, stood side by side this week in New Hampshire, a state where the Vermont senator trounced her just 5 months ago. While he could not overcome her vote totals, Sanders did push her and the Democratic Party to the left.
It is no secret that Hillary Clinton and I disagree on a number of issues. At the Democratic Platform Committee, which ended Sunday night in Orlando, there was a significant coming together between the two campaigns, and we produced by far the most progressive platform in the history of the Democratic Party.
Political scientist Herb Asher, is it the most progressive in the party's history?
Probably not, but it certainly represents a move to the progressive side so that Bernie Sanders can claim to his supporters that his candidacy had an impact. And he can now campaign out there for Hillary Clinton with substantial enthusiasm. And the question becomes, will he be enthusiastic about Hillary, or will his role be to be an attack dog against Donald Trump? But he's going to be out there working hard to elect the Democratic ticket.
Sandy, Sandy, will the Bernie Sanders supporters, there was a lot of angst still on Twitter and Facebook when even during the announcement, a lot of Bernie supporters were saying, never Hillary, I'm going to go with Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate. Will they come back home?
I think enough of them will, and I think because they look at Donald Trump and they see him as a dangerous person, the Bernie people and many of the Trump people don't like the system being rigged. I think they're starting to figure out that Donald Trump is one of the people who's rigging the system, doesn't pay his taxes, thinks that bankruptcy is a way to increase your bottom line and stiff contractors and employees in the process. And finally, Trump is getting the level of scrutiny he deserves, and the Bernie people are starting to talk about that. And I think they're going to look at Hillary, they're going to look at Donald, and they're going to pull the level for
But
Hillary.
I think a lot of those people, when they see that Hillary doesn't follow through during the campaign, pushing the free college, free this and free that, a lot of them might lose some enthusiasm, because just because Bernie said vote for her doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get excited.
Platforms are conveniently ignored when it suits the purposes of the candidate. But the one thing that hasn't been talked about much yet is the Republican platform. And that is a document that probably is more conservative than it's been in the past. Yes. And Donald Trump can certainly disown it. But when you start talking about some of the provisions in the Republican platform, particularly as it relates to social issues, I think that's going to help energize some of the Bernie supporters.
It is.
But, and do you see, I mean, I can see Hillary Clinton going on a college campus between now and November saying, you know, families that make less than $125,000, your kids can go to public colleges for free. You should be championing that, which was Bernie Sanders'
I absolutely do see that, and I see her, if she's going to go to campuses, and I'm sure she will, she'll probably have Bernie with her as much as possible, or he'll be going in front of her. They'll be warming up the audience, that sort of a thing, because certainly that's a demographic that she's had a really hard time breaking through, and he's done an incredibly successful job.
Do you think he really will campaign a lot with her?
Yes.
Yes.
You think so?
Yes.
But the more they talk about free this, there's a lot of middle-class people in America who have to pay the tax bills and realize if they're getting this free, guess who's going to have to pay for it?
Well, we're going to tax the hedge fund people.
But there's fewer and fewer middle-class people in America these days.
Even if you tax the so-called rich people at 100%, it doesn't produce enough to pay for the free health care, the free college, and everything else for free.
But it really does depend what they're talking about that's free. So if they're talking about free tuition, not free cost of college, but free tuition, that's something that's fairly popular. But you do have to worry about what is the price tag for everything. But in fact, actually, again, people use the platforms for their own purposes. Hillary will be sufficiently supportive of provisions of the platform. I think the more interesting questions are what about, trade issues and things like that.
VP pick, you still hear Sherrod Brown's name.
Yes.
We're hearing Richard Cordray's name. Sandy, do you ever see Richard Cordray being a VP pick?
I know he's on the list, and I think there's a lot of people who think with Donald at the top of the Republican ticket, the Democrats really have a good shot at boosting their numbers in the Senate, and they don't want to lose Sherrod Brown. Rich Cordray has already been vetted. He's already passed a background check. He's from a big state. He has good credentials that the Bernie people like, and they're taking a hard look at him.
Even though he doesn't have the national name ID, not even close to really anybody else?
Yeah, he's a Boy Scout.
And
Even
I think
though he's not good on the, I shouldn't say he's bad on the stump, but he's not a firecracker, and they can use, I just don't see, they're taking a really hard look at him. I have a hard time believing that. They're taking a hard look at him.
Rich Cordray's lost 3 of the last 4 really contested races he's had in Ohio. He's not a...
But a VP pick should never be someone you're trying to win a state with. It's about more than that. I think in this case it's about going after Donald Trump, and I'm not sure.
John F. Kennedy did that, and it worked out for him.
There are isolated incidents of it, but I think it's more of an attack.
It's hard to believe that Richard would be at the top of the list.
He said he's on the list.
Yeah.
Could this be the way to get his name in the papers in Ohio for a run for governor maybe in 2018?
Yeah,
or?
it's mostly Ohio people have been talking. It's called self-promotion.
Yeah.
Quickly on the polls, Rob Portman now has a 7-point lead over,
but really that
over
lead's
Ted Strickland.
Not that big when you look at the sample, but the big thing for Ted Strickland is he didn't do well raising money, and the trend line, he started out 9 points ahead. He's now behind. He's not trailing by 7, but I think his money will dry up in September.
Other polls, Herb, have him more closely tied.
Other polls came out had it tied 44-44. And again, I think Quinnipiac does a disservice at times. Peter Brown, I think, just is not just simply a pollster. He loves to be quoted, so he loves to make dramatic statements. And so if, let's say, the next Quinnipiac poll showed that Strickland had tied Portman or whatever, they'd be saying, Strickland makes major gain. But in fact, as Terry says, it may not be the 7-point gap in the first place. So that Quinnipiac's a little irresponsible.
Sandy, any worry that all the barrage of negative ads in Ted Strickland have hurt him a bit and opened up a bit of a gap?
I think they have hurt him, but I think it's still early, and I think Rob Portman has all sorts of problems because people really don't know a lot about him. And right when they started paying attention, they were surprised by what they saw. He signs that treasonous letter to Iraq. He endorses Donald Trump. He's playing that obstructionist game in the Supreme Court. And people are looking at him and saying, wow, I thought he was a nice guy.
But Sandy, once you talk about Ted Strickland, people in Ohio know him, and that's why in this polling his numbers are upside down. That's not good.
I think the numbers to look for are the fundraising numbers. He's going to need money to get on TV. There's no question about that. And I think if it's going to be a blowout for Hillary or anything like that or anything close to that, I think Rob Portman's going to suffer mightily. I mean, it's going to be hard to fight against that.
Okay. The state of Ohio seemingly is ready to come down hard on ECOT, the electronic classroom of tomorrow. The publicly funded but privately run virtual charter school has come under fire. ECOT's graduation rate is about 30%. An audit in March found students were logging in for only an hour a day instead of the required 5 hours a day. Now the state had to go to court to force ECOT to submit to another audit, an audit ECOT officials admit could force it to close. Ann Fisher, there's been a lot of chatter about ECOT over the past year or so. The founder is very politically connected, but it seems like it's snowballing. They seem to be in trouble. ECOT seems to be in trouble here.
Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how the Ohio General Assembly responds when they get back to work sometime, after the election. But in the meantime, it is snowballing. It's absolutely snowballing. Like you said, they've said themselves that they may go out of business if the numbers become public and if the state acts on those numbers, meaning that not enough students are showing up to the classroom, the virtual classroom. So I think they're in a lot of trouble. I think they should be. I mean, they've now been in court. They lost immediately. They weren't able to delay it at all. And now apparently they're saying they're not going to turn over the records anyway.
And key people like the governor, State Auditor Dave Yost, certain key legislators, Republican-wise, have basically said you got to start playing by the rules. So I think they're in trouble and they're shaky, and Sandy ought to be happy.
Sandy, longtime critic of charters and with this charter in particular.
We are critical of the charters that don't properly educate the kids, and these people are at the top of the heap. The New York Times did an analysis recently that showed they have the worst four-year graduation rate in America, the worst. Like Terry said, a lot of the Republicans have come on board. The good charter school advocates like the Fordham Foundation have come out and said terrible things about them. Students First, another charter school group, went out and told the Columbus Dispatch recently, most Ohio charter schools stink. This is from the pro-charter school people. And then the Columbus Dispatch had a really powerful editorial that asked a question, at what point do campaign contributions constitute bribery? We crossed that line a while ago.
Herb, is there a way to help these schools succeed? Because these schools are different. Maybe you can't. Maybe the virtual school just doesn't work. Maybe that experiment may have failed. But is there any way to measure these students differently and not compare them to bricks and mortar schools?
Well, you need to be sensitive to the inputs, to the students that you're teaching. So if in fact somehow you're teaching the least prepared of the least prepared, you want to adjust that in terms of performance ratings. But there's no way you're going to justify literally funding schools in which the students are not participating in instruction. That's a very, very different kind of issue. So the real question becomes, whether it's charter schools that are more traditional, bricks and mortar, whether it's online, what are the appropriate metrics? But it is the case, as everybody has said, that there seems to be an emerging consensus that this is really a bad story.
And I feel for the families for whom the online charter schools have been a godsend. I do feel for them because for some kids, they've got parents who are paying attention. They're making sure they got the nose to the grindstone, that is the computer every day, and they're doing it and they're succeeding because they've had problems with bullying or they've had other issues in a bricks and mortar school. Maybe it's illness or whatnot. But I don't see that they're doing them any favors.
Does the legislature, Terry, dare move the goal line in the lame duck session and loosen the restrictions, loosen the regulations on e-schools?
I don't think it's going to happen in the lame duck. And my view is whether it's public schools or private schools, if you're caught cheating, people are now on to some of the games that have happened in schools, and the taxpayers want to make sure they're getting their money's worth.
Okay. Little self-serving now in our last topic. This is our 500th episode of Columbus on the Record. 3 of the 4 panelists here today, Terry, Sandy, and Herb, were on that very first show. Ann Fisher, then with the Dispatch, was on our 3rd show. Here's what it looked like on Friday, January 13th. Yes, Friday the 13th in January of 2006. Senator Mike DeWine strongly defends Judge Alito. Deborah Price copes with a shakeup in the GOP House leadership. The State Board of Ed keeps science rules. And Stephanie Hightower says goodbye to the Columbus School Board. These topics and more this week on Columbus on the Record. Back then, our set was in WOSU studios on OSU's campus. I had more hair and a distinct orange-like, Trump-like complexion. Herb Asher, his hair had a little less gray. Of course, he had not gone back to work for Gordon Gee just yet. Terry Casey and Sandy Tice were on the same side of the table, at least, because Sandy was then a columnist with the Cleveland Plain Dealer, and she sat in the media chair. And then, as now, education and school funding was on the table. Is it okay for a public official to send his or her child to a private school, especially a school board member?
Mike Coleman did that as mayor. I mean, the reality, a lot of people with the state of the Columbus schools, they kind of almost say we appreciate the honesty.
Bill Clinton.
It sends a message, though.
But the better option, though, is for the public officials to come up with a constitutional way to pay for our public schools, raise up all the public schools, and take this issue off the table.
But Sandy, the Columbus schools spend about $11,400 per pupil.
It's not just about money.
Oh, it isn't? But that's what they say, that it's all they don't have enough money.
Sandy, it's amazing. 10 years, we're still battling over school funding.
And Sandy, in those 5+ years, Columbus is now up to spending $20,000 per pupil. They've got a lot more money.
Well, and the charter schools are sucking more money than they ever did out of the traditional schools. So.
And we were talking about school funding 10 years before this show ever started, too.
So. And any favorite moments on the show? You guys have all been with the show really since the beginning.
Well, I think the favorite thing is, even when I listen and watch, is when you learn something new. That's good, and I think that's one of the hallmarks of this show. It isn't just, sometimes it is, but most of the time it's not battling talking points. It's sharing some information maybe people didn't know or get otherwise in the news.
We try to have some fun once in a while, you know.
Yeah. Patting ourselves on the back. It's a very civilized, thoughtful show. As Terry said, it's not just partisan hacks scoring points or whatever. There's actually meaningful discussion.
We try and class it up for this show.
I've had a lot of laughs. Sometimes they're the ones off the air, but I've had a lot of laughs on the air too.
Sandy, you switched places, so you missed the journalism part of it, the columnist part. You were more of an analyst back then.
This convention is the first time I wish I could actually go back to journalism and cover it. I think it's going to be a wild ride, and to have Donald Trump be the nominee is just astonishing to me.
Look at the past 10 years, African-American president elected, first woman nominee of a major party.
First reality game show host, or reality television star. Yeah.
We've seen the rise and the fall of the Ohio Democrats. In 2006, in November, they won all 5 statewide constitutional offices in the Ohio House.
Big margins.
4 years later, they were down and out again.
Senate Bill 5, the past 10 years, the Mark Dan scandal that kept us going for at least 3 or 4 months.
We've got to be thankful to politicians providing good material.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yes.
The only good thing about 2016 is that it's become the full employment act for political scientists.
That's great. Every year it gets better. All right. The tradition continues. It's time for our final off-the-record parting shots. And Sandy Tice, you're up first.
There was a school board meeting today of the Electronic Classroom of Tomorrow, or ECOT. They are trying to figure out what to do next. I think what they're going to do is they are not going to open their books to the state auditors unless a court forces them to do so, and the court is going to force them to do so, and when they open their books, it will be even worse than we imagine.
Terry.
Today on TV, there's a Columbus issue #1 about district representation. They started on TV. They kind of fibbed a little bit, saying council members make $80,000 a year and there'll suddenly be 25,000 of them. But it's going to be an interesting issue. Right now, the issue would pass. It probably is going to lose as they spend all that money beating it up and saying, if you don't vote against this, we'll stop all police protection in Columbus.
Yeah.
Several weeks ago, Joe Ingles on this program predicted violence at the Republican National Convention in Cleveland. And I do think that, you have to take things into context and that people are more tempered at this point because of what's been happening in recent weeks. So I predict maybe not violence.
Okay. Herb.
And I think Ivanka Trump will be the star of the Republican convention, assuming they're smart enough to use her to introduce her father to the national audience. They did that when he announced for president, and she's superb.
Something to watch for.
Yeah. That's it.
All
We'll
right.
call Trump and give him your advice.
Don't do it, Herb.
All right, I will end by saying thank you to you, the viewer, because without you, the viewer watching every week, we wouldn't be here. Where these balloons come from? And so thank you to all you folks who watch every week. I know you're out there. I hear from you all the time. And because TV is really a team sport, I'd like to thank all the many people here at WOSU who work on this show every week. Thanks to them. And we will see you next week for show 501.